Let's bring in Mr. Brian Mast, who was the chair of the House Foreign Relations Committee, House Foreign Affairs Committee. Chairman, thank you for this. Just, I don't know what you know, but maybe you can help us, give us some guidance on this. Is it to your liking? What thoughts do you have, Congressman?
Yeah, I've read a lot of the text, and it looks like what I would say is a first volley. I think it reflects in large part what Russia wants to see out of this, and a lot of things that Ukraine is not going to want to see, and NATO and other European allies are not going to want to see as a part of it, but extremely comprehensive. And I think as people get to read the text of this in the future, they'll see just how much is being dealt with. Everything from what you do with frozen assets. Can somebody become a part of NATO or EU? What if one side launches a missile or invades the other side? What do you do in terms of anything related to war crimes or any atrocities that were committed by either side of this during the war? How do you return bodies? You know, what takes place with integration into economies? How do you rebuild what's been destroyed in Ukraine? And the list goes on and on. There are a number of things that I think so many in the world that pay attention to this don't actually realize that you have to deal with in terms of moving forward.
Will there be, in your judgment, protections for Ukraine's own security going forward?
So that is absolutely a part of it. Protections for Ukraine's security going forward, outlined in a number of different ways, maybe not satisfactory to some, but outlined in terms of this is the protection that takes place in terms of a force. This is, NATO countries cannot be necessarily inside of Ukrainian territory, or NATO operations can't be necessarily inside of Ukrainian territory, but this is what will take place. If there is any kind of attack, there are very specific provisions for protections.
And I am assuming that there's no provision that suggests Ukraine will enter into NATO.
Very specifically, from what I've read, it would be that Ukraine would be prohibited from entering into NATO, in addition to any expansion of any country into NATO.
And Mr. Chairman, just one other. I hate to be. I don't mean to cross-examine. I'm just literally asking questions.
Happy to answer what I can.
Yes, sir. The role of the United States in preserving Ukraine's security. The role of the U.S.
A large role in that, everything from rebuilding to really being a part of the structure of anything going forward, leading something that is more ambiguous, which is a working group, a task force, a conversation larger than that between Russia and Ukraine going forward to decide exactly how you deal with a lot of different security things, creating the infrastructure to have that conversation under auspices of peace, but United States of America leading that.
Just a few seconds, Mr. Chairman. Early reading on your part, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Again, I will simply characterize it as this is a volley conducted largely by the Russian side of the table, and Ukraine's and Europe and NATO and EU are going to have their chance to have their input.
Got it. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair, Mr. Brian Mast. Thank you ever so much.